Hi, welcome. This is our first lecture. We would usually be having in person, but due to circumstances beyond my control, this is going to be a pre-recorded lecture. The goal here is to introduce you to Python and the tools we're going to be using through the semester. If you have a laptop, please make sure you're bringing it to class, and if you don't, you'll set this up in one of the computers in the lab. What we are going to do is I'm just going to walk you through the tools we're going to use and explain a little bit about what those tools are. So we have Python. Python is a programming language. What is a programming language? A programming language is a way to instruct a computer, but not necessarily computer speak. So what happens is a computer is a piece of hardware, right? It's a bunch of circuits, and those circuits need to have electricity powered through them, and they have to do certain things based off of those instruction sets. So for example, right now you're watching this video, or I'm recording this video, so the camera that I'm recording into is sending a signal into my computer, and that computer is processing the signal and storing the information, and later when you watch it, there's going to be, oh, it says, hey, do these pixels this way and do these pixels that way. What we need to do is we need to be able to instruct our computer, hey, you need to be able to translate those signals from the hardware into some actions, right? So for example, if I write a piece of code that will ask the user for their age and then tell them, oh, you're old, you're very old, or you're not old enough, or whatever else it is, then we have some basic logic and we have some basic instructions, and that information gets processed by the hardware, by the computer. How does that work? That's where it gets confusing, right? Because there's the hardware itself, and then there's what's called firmware, which is not hardware, not software. It's firmware. It's taking the general sets of switches and like the general pieces of circuits that work there and making sure that software can talk to it. It's like, oh, if I receive this signal, I do this. And that firmware is the signals that everyone agrees upon. It expects signals that everyone agrees upon. For example, your screen might be HDMI or might be a DisplayPort or something like that. And though that is an agreed upon protocol for people to use. So what we do with that is we're going to take but we don't write directly on the hardware, right? And we don't even write firmware. We write software that's several layers up. We don't write machine code, right? That's what somebody else does. We write Python. Python is a programming language that will get translated into machine code. So in order for us to do that, we need to actually download the version of Python we're going to use. So we're going to use 3.12.6, or just 3.12, whatever the current version related to that is. So we click download, and we quickly download Python. Run this. And I'm going to upgrade because I already have Python on my computer. So I'm upgrading. You might have to install it instead. And what I'm actually installing here is what's called the Python interpreter and the executables. An interpreter is the thing that translates the code that I've written into code that runs on the computer. I'm not sure if this is your first and second semester, so I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm talking down to you guys, but this is just me making sure that everyone's on the same page, and just even if it's review, hopefully it's helpful review. So first thing we need is something that understands the code that we write, and the second thing we need is a tool to write our code in. So for our purposes for this class, we are either going to use PyCharm Community or we're going to use Visual Studio Code. I think for now we'll use PyCharm Community until things change otherwise. So to do that, you go PyCharm, just do a Google search for that, right? There's PyCharm. Oh, this is from jetbrains.com/PyCharm. And my computer is doing too many things right now, so it's going to be a little annoying for the moment. It's just my internet is being annoying. Perfect. So there's PyCharm, but we don't want PyCharm full-fledged. We download, but we're looking for the community. So when we download this, we can download the professional edition, but we don't want that. We want the community edition. So you're going to go and download the community edition. Now, I already have, I'll do this really quick. So I download PyCharm. It is going to start downloading as well. And I'm going to wait for Python to finish installing before I do PyCharm. So PyCharm is going to be the tool that we use to actually write our code, whereas Python is going to be the thing that takes our code and translates it into something the computer understands. We are going to focus, this class is going to be focused on object-oriented programming, which means we're going to talk about classes and objects and inheritance and a lot of that complicated stuff, as well as, since it's a introductory course, we're going to talk a lot about the basics of programming and underlying things such as loops and functions and things like that, and we will hopefully have time for all of it. So PyCharm is installing, but in the meantime I have Python installed. So because I have Python installed, I am able to run a Python program. To show you what that looks like, I'm going to just open a new window in Terminal, right? So in my command line, I'm at my desktop, and I will explain a little bit about command line in another class. I'm going to go and I'm going to create a new, just a basic text document, and call this p.txt. Inside this program, right, inside this file, I'm going to open this text file, and then I'm just going to type some stuff into it, right? In this case, I'm just going to type print hello. And I'm going to save this file. Now, this is a text file, right? The cool thing is that Python, the interpreter, doesn't actually care about the kind of file, right? All that Python, in the install is there, but I'm going to wait a minute before I explain this, before I do the install. The cool thing about Python, about the Python interpreter, is it doesn't care what the file extension is, right? This is a .txt file. All it cares about is that it understands the instructions. So if I write python p.txt, it prints out the word hello. And just to show you, if I open this, and I change the word to funny stuff, but it works. Oops, there's a typo noise somewhere. And I save this. I have to save my file, and then I close my file, and then I run the same thing, and I say, hey, Python, I want you to read this file, p.txt. And now it prints out, hey, funny stuff, but it works. And what that's doing is that is a Python program that is taking some instructions that I wrote that are in Python, and it translates them. And it reads them, and it does what I'm saying to do, which in this case is just print out whatever my message is. Now I'm going to start running the Python community, PyCharm Community Edition setup. So we go next. I'm going to install it just where it says to install. I don't want to create a desktop folder. You want to add bin to the folder path, add open as project, and you're going to want to probably create an association as well. I'm not, because I prefer to do it with something else, but you're going to want to check this one even though I'm not doing it. We click next. It says it's going to do it into JetBrains, and it's going to show me my details here. These programs, by the way, Python, the Python interpreter, and PyCharm Community Edition are both available for Windows and Mac, and I believe Linux as well. Even Python is definitely available for Linux, but I believe PyCharm is also available for Linux. Once again, remember that you need to download the Community Edition. So this is going to install, and once this installs, we will... once this installs, I'm going to run it and just show you a basic project we'll create a basic one little project, and that one little project will be an example of Python. It'll just be that same example that we've done as a print, but we'll use it inside PyCharm, and I will talk you through a little bit of how PyCharm works. You're probably going to want to skip ahead like 15-20 seconds. I can't really edit this video too much, but I'm not going to talk about anything important. The cat is sitting in the corner. Like I said, I'm not talking about anything important, but the cat is sitting right behind me over there, and he's fast asleep, and I really wish he was sitting in that bed. Sorry. I don't know why I get so disoriented, because the camera I'm looking at is backwards. But I really wish he was sitting in that bed, and he was actually in frame, but cats will never actually listen when you want them to, and so he is not visibly in the video despite being right in the corner over there. Alright, it is almost done with the installation. I'm going to reboot manually later because I don't really need to do the reboot. I'm going to start, and I'm going to go to PyCharm, and you see I have PyCharm Professional, and during the class I am going to use PyCharm Professional because that's a version I have access to. But for our purposes here, I'm just going to use PyCharm Community Edition to walk you through it. And PyCharm Professional just has a couple more features. So I run it, it starts with this nice little startup screen. I confirm that I understand the terms and conditions. I'm going to allow it to access my network. Import settings from, I'm going to skip my import for now. I'm going to create a new project. Okay, so I'm doing a pure Python project, and the first of all is, this is where it's putting it. I don't want it to put it there. I want it instead to go into my D drive. Oh, my E drive. My E drive, I have a projects folder, and I want to create, and I want the project to go into my project folder. And then we'll do name of the project, and the name of the project is going to be example1. Right, and you can see the project will create in project/example1, which is exactly where I want it to go. Now, interpreter type. This is kind of important. What this does is it says, hey, I know you installed Python, but we often need our project to maintain the interpreter with the project, and I'll explain more about this later, but for now, we want to make sure it's a project VENV, which is a virtual environment, which means that any changes I make specifically to my Python, like any other packages I install, will be local to my project. And then I just push create. And it's creating my virtual environment, which means it's setting up a kind of like a fake reinstalling Python type thing. I don't really need to know what's new thing. You see this .venv file is what I was talking about. So inside my example file, I'm going to create, inside my example folder, I'm going to create a new Python file, and we'll call it main. And now we're just going to create a very basic Python program, which I'll just do that same print. Hello. Now you'll notice right away that this is actually much more helpful because it's highlighting different parts of my code in different colors. And eventually you will learn what those colors mean. Let me just zoom in on this whole thing a little bit. Because I realize that might be a little bit small, but if I use settings, appearance, zoom 200, okay, much better. So there we go. So you'll see how like print and hello are actually in different colors, and my circle brackets are in different colors, and all of those actually, those colors have meaning, and eventually you'll get comfortable with it, and I'll explain what those colors are as they come along. The other things to know about this is also I can always push run. I can run the current file, right, or I can select a file and set up configurations, and we'll talk more about those at a later date. When I run it, it opens the window here. What this is it's a lot like my console window, right? Except it's, hey, this is just the Python runner. So it runs this command, right? It says, hey, I want to access the example1, which is the name of my project folder, .venv/script/python. So I'm using the Python from the virtual environment, and then it's running the project file of main.py. And it uses the full path, and all of this is automatically done by PyCharm, so I wouldn't even have to think about that, but it's important to understand what it's doing, even if you don't have to think about it from time to time, because eventually things go wrong. Other things to know about this. So first of all, this little drop-down menu, this is all of my version control and tools and file and all that fun stuff, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. This is the project. I can open a different project. I can set up version control, which we'll talk about version control at another date, but that is how I keep track of my project and how I share my project and do a couple of other things. Next, it can look at the structure. So here, there's no real structure because I only have one layer. Eventually, we start creating classes and functions. So for example, if I go class, right? I go class hello. And then we have the init. What else really need? Okay. Oops, not, definition. And I'm getting errors, and these errors are, oops, there we go. And it automatically put the word self in there, and we'll explain a lot more about how this stuff works later, but now you can see that structure actually shows, oh, I've got a class, and classes in Python have a bunch of default stuff, and all that default stuff automatically shows up. And because I added the .me as part of this class, it actually says, hey, look, we've got this feature of, we've got this .me thing. We've got this me element of the class. And so structure is going to be helpful to navigating through your code. There's also the folder, which will, hey, let you navigate through the project. So now both structure and folder are open, and I close that, and that goes away, and shows me the different files and stuff. Python console. If I want to just quickly test a bit of Python, like, oh, I'm not sure how, you know, if 5 I'm supposed to do plus like this, or if I want to do 5 minus 2, right? Like, I'm not sure which one I want to do. So really quickly, I can just open a Python console, which is by pressing this button, and immediately get the answer. I can also stop this console, or I can restart this console, and it will keep track of the values. So if I go a equals 5, it now actually is storing the number 5. So if I do a times 2, it prints out 10 because I'm using this Python console. And I realize that this is going fast. There's a reason that this is in a video, so that you can come and rewatch it and make sure you understand it. And as we go through the course, we're going to be using these tools a lot more. Next is run. So this is the window where when I run the code over here, this pops up. Python packages. This is once we start using other people's code in what are called packages. This is where we'll see them, and we'll be able to manage them quickly. Services, don't worry too much about that. That's like some more complex stuff. Terminal. Terminal is an important one. Notice here how it launches in the virtual environment, but this is the equivalent of this window, except it's opening up automatically in the virtual environment. What does that mean? That means when I run Python, I'm using Python from here, not from my computer. So if I go Python over here in my regular terminal window and I type Python, I'm getting what is in this case the same version of Python because they were installed the same thing. But if I update my computer's version of Python, or I downgrade it for some reason, this will not change because it's still going to be using the same version that's in this virtual environment. And this version will only change if I specifically change it in there. It might not sound like much, but it does actually give us a lot of control over things. And I'll explain more about that. That'll be like the kind of thing that it'll eventually come up down the road. And it's kind of helpful to understand. Problems. This is like, for example, if I'm missing that there, all of a sudden, hey, there's an error in your code. And so this will be all the errors for my entire project, well, either for the file or for the whole project, or server-side analysis we're not dealing with because we're not doing web stuff yet. So don't worry about that, but in the problems it'll show us some great things. Also at the bottom here it says, hey, this is the project and this is the file. And then once again, if I do something like if I define, oops, caps lock should be out for this, define hello as a function, right? And then I go call print this will just be file. This will just be this bottom part is just going to be the level of what file I'm in and where I'm at. So if I have multiple folders, for example, if I open this for a second, now you'll see it says, hey, you're in example in .venv.lib/lib/site-package/virtual.py. We don't ever want to open the venv files directly, but just as an example of what that shows you. But where's my structure? You see now, hey, there's a function in this file, so it shows me that function. All right, that is PyCharm. The alternative is to use Visual Studio Code, which has similar tools but is not as complex and not as robust. For now, we're going to stick with PyCharm Community. And if you want to use Visual Studio Code, I'm not going to stop you, but any of the headaches you come across, I'm not really going to be, I'm going to try to help you a little bit, but I'm not going to recommend you use this. Hopefully that walkthrough gave you the information you need to get started, and I look forward to, this journey, teaching you all this semester. Good luck.